to edition 100, part 4 of our Killa No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri Pritchard-McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. This isn't hero worship. We do this podcast because we have mutual interest in serial killers and wrong-uns, because this is a spin-off one. As long as we are doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison or visiting their graves that are no longer there. There we go.
Thanks so much for being patient with us. Apologies.
Yeah, for those that have been, for those that keep mithering, wind your necks in. I understand that you're keen to get the next step.
We're also not keen to do it. It's just work, isn't it?
Yeah, things get in the way, things happen. But yeah, we've to be honest, we're not dragging our feet with this one because we're enjoying spending time with this Jimmy Savile.
I'm actually luxuriating in the company of disgraced paedophile DJ Jimmy Savile. I never want it to end, Rachel. It's like a holiday.
Yeah, really, really great. Really enjoying it. To be honest, I've quite. It's weird, this one, because we keep finding more and more.
Yeah.
Like every time I sit down to do a bit more research, I go, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, you were sending me pictures of him yesterday. I should clarify, from adverts, not our own collection.
Yeah, I wasn't going, look at this wrong'un. So, obviously, he was so popular in the sort of 60s, 70s. He did advertising for various things. So he did one for British Rail. I mean, you may as well do it now as the corpse that he is, because the trains are so fucking shit. He's the perfect spokesman for them. So he did British Rail, and he did sort of various other things, like a couple of adverts that I didn't really understand what they were for, but he had his top off smoking a cigar, and I'm like, that is the most unappealing thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't get that.
But strap in, because you thought this was a joke. And the only reason, if I'd have seen this before reading about it first, I would have thought it was one of those jokes that go around on the internet, a meme or whatever they call them.
Yes, a meme. Well done, Nana.
Thank you. He advertised children's shoes, girls' shoes.
Oh, fucking hell.
Little girls' shoes for Start Right. And this is a childless man, which is the least of the problems. And he stood there and he's got the shoe and he's like, oh, now then, girls, get these shoes. And on the I can't remember what the slogan is, but it's just like, because I sent you and you went, is this a joke? I was like, no, it's real. It's mad. I don't understand why he would be the person for the shoe.
Yeah, but then I also don't know who's meant to advertise shoes. Do you know what I mean?
Well, if you think it's the 70s. It's a shoe for little girls going to school, Start Right shoes. Who's a trustworthy woman on TV in the 70s?
No one is on TV in the 70s who's a woman. Who's not pans people.
Oh, fucking hell, that's true.
How do you explain what pans people are to people who aren't British and or have old parents?
They were a dance troupe on Top of the Pops.
Yeah, so Top of the Pops was like where bands would come and allegedly play their songs live in front of a studio audience. Jimmy Savile was very integral to that. Now, when the band couldn't make it, because sometimes they played music videos, right, in later years, maybe?
Yeah.
It was sort of an early proto sort of MTV type thing. They would have this dance troupe called Pans People come on, and it would just sort of like women in their 20s in like all-in-one leotards or flowing chiffon doing your dance routines. It was very strange. While a song played, they would dance to it. And that's what we looked at. Or sometimes they were sort of backing dancers. It was very weird.
Yeah, very weird. I'm still trying to think of a popular woman on TV in the 70s who wasn't an actress. Esther Ranson?
Yeah, maybe it's Esther holding down the fort. Gloria Hunniford.
Yeah. Gloria Hunniford, yeah.
Angela Rippon.
Do you remember? Well, do you remember we were on Darling, do you remember when we were on Pointless Celebrities?
I do, yeah.
And Bobby Ball, R.I.P.
Yeah.
Cannon and Ball were very, very popular back in the day comedy duo. Tommy Cannon and Bobby Ball, they were on as well. So I was a bit like, oh wow, Cannon and Ball were on. And Angela Rippon, who is a sort of a newsreader, TV presenter, and Gloria Hunniford, who is a beloved TV presenter, isn't she? Mm-hmm. Both older ladies now. And I can't remember what happened, but you said something. And when you said something, Bobby Ball went, hey, be quiet now, we're talking to real women.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
When he was talking to Gloria and
oh my God.
Angela Rippon. And do you know the mad thing is? I don't think I noticed at the time. And it was only when it was shown on TV that Tim's dad went, well, I'm surprised you didn't say something about that.
I didn't know that had been said.
I don't think I knew it had been said.
That is absolutely mad. Well, can I tell you that, not to speak ill of the dead, and I'm not, because I think Bobby Ball's was fantastic. But so much so that a couple of years ago, when I was living with the amazing George Fouracres, who is now just a regular at the RSC, and he was doing his Gentleman show. So he was living with us at the Edinburgh Fringe, and we were all sat around, we were talking about, like, he and I both have a real soft spot for, like, old school entertainers, and what was it called? Wheelers and...
The wheel tappers and shunters.
That's it, the wheel tappers and shunters, which was like, they literally built a working men's club and filmed it. So we were watching that going, God, it's really good. Like, everyone maligns northern, especially club comedy, and even now it has this huge stigma. And we were watching it and it was so funny. And then there was a very young Cannon of Ball on it, and Tommy is like singing a song, and then all of a sudden Bobby gets up in the middle of the audience and is like, that's my mate, that is. And he just like is ruining his sort of chance while he's singing a song. He's like, that's my mate, I'm proud of him, that's my mate, that is. And he's like, sit down. He's like, no, he's my mate, you could not tell me to sit down. And then he starts, and it's just really funny and almost like quite alternative comedy. And then he starts singing, he's like, oh, let's sing that song we know, and then starts singing a song. It has the word Pakistani in it, and that's all I remember it, as we all sort of like immediately pause the video and be like, it was so good until that moment. We were like, this is great. Why isn't stuff like this on telly anymore? Why isn't stuff like this on this is like the finest entertainment, and then just the word Pakistani drifting out of, which in itself... So
you're like, why isn't this on TV anymore? This is brilliant, blah, blah. And then that sound effect that is always used on sort of things like that, record scraping.
And obviously the word Pakistani in isolation is not offensive, but I would say the rest of the context of the song made it so it wasn't a compliment, let's put it that way.
Well, he was talking to real women. I can't believe that we missed that.
That's so strange. That's so...
I can't remember how we're talking about Bobby Ball. How did we get onto this?
I've got no idea, actually.
What the fuck were we talking
and we were talking about advertising shoes, and I suggested Angela.
Oh, my God! Right. So, yeah. I think that's one of the most bizarre tangents from shoe adverts to Bobby Ball.
Yeah. So,
he's doing adverts, he's popular, he's on everything. He's doing his charity marathons, allegedly. He's doing... also, listen to this. I did a half marathon the other week. I don't know if I mentioned this. They ran out of medals.
What did they give you? A handshake?
What did they give me? I tell you what, it's a good job I'm in a good mood at the minute. So, finished the thing, got to the thing. And, you know, as juvenile as it is, you're thinking, oh, great, I get a medal and a T-shirt. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So, you get, after 13 miles of hell, which I'd be... Listen, if anyone can give me a tip on this, actually... I'm a lot healthier now that I haven't drank or smoked for 6 months. Can you believe it? Who'd have thought I'd ever been saying that? And I do a lot of exercise anyway, but running is not my strong point. However, I'd be a lot better at running if my top right hip, below my hip, didn't hurt and it feels tight. And if that didn't start at mile 5, I think I'd have got a much better time. But it's not about the time, it's about the experience. Anyway, my point is, I get to the finish and I'm like staggering over to the thing to get my medal. And I'm thinking, oh no, why are the medals not as colourful as they were when I saw them on the table this morning? And I felt really sorry for the volunteers, because obviously they're going to have to deal with a lot of, you know, angry people who want medals. And the bloke was really being nice to me, and I'm thinking, what's wrong? And he said, I'm really sorry we've run out of medals, but if you leave your name and address, we'll send you the medal and the T. I was like, yeah, fine, whatever, you know. I'm not going to get into a fight, am I? Who gives a shit? Well, me, as it turns out, because half an hour afterwards I was really depressed about it. But there was a woman in front of me who, I mean, rightly so, because you've got one job, and that one job is to look at how many people are running it and get as many medals as the people that are running, and maybe 100 extra. So she said... To the poor girl who was just taking names and addresses, you know, she just went, it's not about the medal, is it though? It's about the experience. Oh. And the experience has been mad. I thought, well, she is right. But it is a nice day. Let's just try and have a nice time. Anyway, he's running his medals. He's running his marathon. Look at me, I'm obsessed with the medal. I say I'm not bothered, but it's clearly on my mind.
Yeah, it really is.
He's running his marathons.
Can someone make a medal for Rachel? We've got so many talented... Is this all right to just ask? Yeah, podcast free, innit? Now,
oh, shout out. Can I do a shout out before we carry on?
Yeah,
shout out sounds like Mickey Flanagan's new material. Shout out. So Leah Mitchell is a tattoo artist who got in touch with us through the All Killa No Filla email. And she's based in Newcastle, and I went up this weekend to do a show, and she covered up my old tattoo for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's amazing. Like, it took me so long of looking at people's work, and when she got in touch, I looked at her Instagram, and I was like, this is the person.
Oh, wow.
She's fucking great. So I went, she's so talented, so talented. She works at Blue Bottle Tattoo in Newcastle. Cannot recommend. I had such a laugh in there. Everyone in there is so relaxed, so nice. I don't know what vibe you expect from a tattoo parlour, but this was just dead funny. Everyone's dead sound. Anyway, she's covered it up, but the reason I'm mentioning it now in this bit of the podcast is because I've not told Tim.
Where is it?
I want to see it. It's on my ankle. And
Okay.
I'll send you a picture of it. It's a lovely, it's a lady head, and it's amazing. I mean, it's all scabby at the minute.
What was it?
It was a cat. I had it done when I was 14 years old, didn't I?
Yeah.
So it was a cat, and it was all like blue and, you know, withered, like a poor unfortunate soul in The Little Mermaid. And she's so talented, but I got that thing of feeling bad for the old tattoo. You know, I felt guilty. I was like, she's still there.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I thought was, because Tim's not a big fan of tattoos, and this isn't why I'm telling him. I've been doing loads of research and looking, and her work is so good that I was just going, oh, I like this, I like that. And then we came to the thing, and she's personalised it. It's brilliant. Anyway, the point is, I've not told him. So I came home on Monday afternoon. No, what? This is what I found. Usually, when I've been away gigging, I come home the earliest train I can get. But this time, old Fabs was getting a later train. No one asked. No one said, why are you getting a later train? No one thought, if I'd have gone missing that day, would anyone have said, well, actually, she did change her routine, because usually, did anyone notice, right? So I came home. And it was a bit tender. You know, fuck it, I tell you what, it hurt. And I realised that the swear word that I reserve now, that I've noticed that having this tattoo, the swear word I reserve for pain, when something's really bad, is not the C word, it's not cunt, it's motherfucker. I never say motherfucker unless something really hurts.
Okay, that's your big one, is it?
That's my big one. So, tattoo's done. Thank you, Leah. And it's covered up with a second skin sort of thing you can see through, and you've got to keep that on for a few days. But absolutely thrilled with it. And I've just not, he's not noticed yet. But I mean, in his defence, he is away for 2 days now. So I'm in this thing now where I've just not, he's just not noticed.
Are you trying to be like, God, my ankle? You know when people try and draw attention to something without drawing attention to it.
Yeah. Hey, do you remember in the Victorian days when ankles were a thing?
I must have told you this, but there's this person that we know who, me and my sketch group Tara were like backstage at something, and they were backstage as well. And they clearly got a new jacket they were really proud of, which... Do you know who this is about?
No, who is it?
Okay, we'll have to beat this. And he's got like a...
This is classic behaviour from them, yeah.
Yeah. So this person comes in and they've got a jacket on that they're really proud of, and it sort of relates to one of their hobbies, and it's quite distinct. And they come in and they lean on the door frame and sort of look around the room and make eye contact with everyone. And everyone's like... And this person never wears a jacket indoors like that. And certainly not a jacket like this, because they're quite...
No, always a leather jacket.
Yeah, they're quite staid in what they wear, but this was sort of like a big bomber jacket. And we were like, you all right? And they're like, yeah, just, yeah. And we're like... Oh, that's a nice jacket. And we're like, what jacket? Oh, this jacket. And it was like really yeah, obviously you've come in here to show everyone your jacket, so just go, guys, look at my jacket that I got, as opposed to like, God, I hadn't even noticed I was still wearing my brand new jacket that I absolutely love, that's really cool.
That's so funny. You know what? It's such classic behaviour for that person as well.
Yeah, it really is.
Because they're so grumpy, but But really, they just want to be part of everything.
Yeah.
And people to go, oh, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And it had his name on the back.
It had his name on the front. Yeah, like where you'd have it on military name on sort of your breast.
That's so funny. Anyway, adverts. He's doing his marathons. He's doing this. He's constantly on TV. So he's graduated from the dance halls to radio to television now. So he's presented Top of the Pops, which was a huge show. He has had Savile's Travels. Fucking hell, they even give Jimmy Savile a travel show. But they won't give two women anything. Savile's Travels. What else was he on? He had, Jim Will Fix It came along in the 80s.
Clunk Click was the thing.
Clunk Click. Also, Jim Will Fix It, they always go, 12 million people watched it. Because there was fuck all else on. It was either that or Coronation Street, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. There was 4 channels, and it wasn't like it is now.
Yeah. And there's very little made for...
No one had videos either.
Yeah, there's very little made for families. You know, like...
Yeah.
This was for children and adults, so that's, hitting a really juicy demographic anyway.
Exactly. So he's on loads of stuff. He's still doing... I think he's still doing radio at this point, but he's very much he's also done This Is Your Life, the show that Michael Aspel used to present, where they surprise a celebrity with the Red Book, which Jimmy Savile was buried with. Did you know that?
There's another thing. We can get onto the mad Egyptian tomb that is his grave at some point, and everything he was buried with. He's buried with your medal, Rachel. That's where it went.
No, and my T-shirt. I've got to go and get it. It's like a Bush Tucker trial.
Like Indiana Jones.
I'm blindfolded. oh God, I've made myself feel sick. We'll get to that. So he's a big presence. He's a household name. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows who Jimmy Savile is. Mm-hmm. And of course, on the flip side of this, you've got his behaviour in the hospitals and in the institutions that he's going to. But also he's raising a lot of money, like Stoke Mandeville Hospital needed millions of pounds, didn't they?
Yes.
To stay open, basically.
Yeah.
And he raised the money for that.
Yes.
By using his contacts. He's friends with Margaret Thatcher. Ew.
And Prince Charles, formerly Prince Charles.
And Prince Charles is using him as a confidant.
Taking advice from him on marriage and on media. Now, I have had a deep dive into the report that was published on him that was sort of commissioned into his relationship with the BBC and why it didn't come out. Would you like to hear the highlights and indeed lowlights of that report, Rachel?
I would like to hear it.
So, the report was done... it started on the 11th of October 2012 and it was published on February the 25th, 2016, which is a long time. It's called the Dame Janet Smith Report, and that is because it was carried out by Dame Janet Smith, who is from Stockport originally, went to Bolton
She did the
School.
Shipman Inquiry, didn't she?
She did the Shipman Inquiry, yeah. What
Do you know
a pedigree.
That was in when I worked at Tourist Information, the Town Hall Extension in Manchester, the Shipman Inquiry was in the same building.
Really?
Yeah, and it used to be you used to see the signs for it like Shipman Inquiry, level 1.
Oh my God, you probably shared a canteen. You probably broken bread with Dame Janet Smith.
Every time someone says that, it reminds me of that comedian. Do you remember?
Oh, break bread with me, brother. Oh my God, that's so funny.
So should I tell the story very quickly?
Yeah. Can I just also say hello to Chris Kearns, who listens to this podcast and is one of the nicest men in comedy. He is so sweet and so lovely about this podcast. Oh, what a
joy
guy.
to be around, Chris Kearns.
Yeah, joy. Absolute joy. But I did a lovely gig for him in Liverpool.
I think I'm doing it, the same one soon.
Oh, you'll love it. You'll have a great time. Is it good? Yeah, it's fantastic. And I brought my fella along, and my fella sometimes he really wanted to see the lineup because it was so good. And sometimes he feels a bit self-conscious being in a green room, but Chris made him feel so welcome and was so sweet with him and was really funny. Yes. Hello, Chris.
So we must say this story isn't about you, Chris, even though it's a Scouse accent.
Yeah.
And the person doesn't actually gig anymore. So this person was on stage struggling. you know?
We've all done it. We've all done it.
It's all happened. I mean, less so with me. But, no, it's happened. It happens. Yeah, everyone's going to struggle. And he's trying to, you know... Because what happens is you often do your material and then you go, oh, fucking hell. And then you think, I'm going to have to just talk to them. And then you talk to them and you're getting nothing from that. So he's like, he's changed tack, he's done his material, that's not worked. He started to chat to someone on the front row and he's met with resistance, a brick wall of a man, if you will. And in frustration, he just went, break bread with me brother.
It's such a great... Well, it perfectly sums up how you feel when you're like, just throw me any kind of bone and I'll do something with it. But if you're stonewalling me, then like there's nothing I can do.
I must say as well, before we just get back to the actual topic that we're meant to be talking about, where I am recording, as you know, it's very noisy at the moment where I live. There is a house across the road from me that is having building work done, and I swear to God, they must be building an H.H. Holmes fucking murder castle. Because this has been going on for months now. Day after day after day. Things are arriving and it's never ending. And I just see a man's head pop out of the window and a van arrives. I don't know what's going on. And I'm sick of it. So if you hear a beeping noise, I'm as irritated as you are. Back to Saville.
I've remembered one of the things we were going to talk about, but...
oh, yeah.
It's just something that happened. I think it's really funny, but... my partner and I this is really quite unbearable of us. We attended a seminar in our local area about how to be proactively anti-racist, and it was this is recently, and it was to do. It was.
Do you have pubs there?
No, we fucking don't. We don't. So we're doing this course. It's very interesting. It's put on by the universities in Wales were doing it, and we're both quite nervous about. Weirdly, everyone else doing it, and if they were coming with an agenda, and they sort of go, oh, so who's, so this is what today's going to be. Any sort of thoughts on how you might feel going in? Is there anything you're worried about? Anything you're excited about? What do you want to get from today? And someone spoke and said something that was absolutely fine, but maybe a bit or we know not to use that word kind of thing. But the whole emphasis was on making it sure it was comfortable and that everyone's free to express themselves. And then someone else spoke. And
don't tell me Bobby Ball was there.
Bobby Ball was there. He did his Pakistani stuff, yeah. Someone started speaking, and I heard a noise to the side of me, and I turned round to my right-hand side where my partner was sat, and he's on anti-anxiety medication, and he was popping another one in his mouth, because
my God.
he's so sweet and so empathetic, and I think he was empathetic to the people of colour who were leading the session, and all these sort of some of these North Walians were asking some quite not rum questions, but where I'm from, a thing I've noticed is people, when they're telling a story, if someone is a race that isn't white, basically, they will always mention it. So they'll be like, oh, we went to this, and it won't be a part of the story, and they're not even doing it in an offensive way, but it just shows you that they always notice it. So, and I go to do it. They'll be like, oh, we went to this restaurant, we had this lovely waitress, Indian, I think she was, and it's that doesn't matter that she was, and it's their way of going, which is fine, but also the fact that they're which is fine, in their brain is the uncomfortable thing. But yeah, I just was basically hearing my partner, every time someone asked a question, pop another beta blocker into his mouth.
God almighty. Fucking hell.
Anyway, so the Dame Janet Smith report. Now, she interviewed 700 individuals. It was criticised for how much it cost. The exact figure I can't find, but some people say it's about 6.5 million up to 10 million. So a really obviously it's years and years of work and lots of people being interviewed.
I mean, that's probably money that they would have spent on programmes that they'd make with Jimmy Savile, so who gives a shit?
Yeah. You can't not investigate how it happened, right? It's 3 parts.
Well, it shouldn't get as far as an investigation, really. It just shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, well, agreed. It's 3 parts. One is sort of a summary, and then there's a bit on Jimmy Savile, and then there's a separate section on Stuart Hall as well, who I feel like we should maybe cover in the next episode, because he is sort of linked to this. It's about 1,000 pages.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. She found out that there was about 72 victims. 8 years old is the youngest victim. And 8 of them were raped. Most of them were sexually assaulted, groped or, harassed, that kind of thing. Now, it started in the 1940s. And it carried on until 2009, but he was most...
Fucking hell.
Isn't that... Yeah, that's unbelievable. Isn't it unbelievable?
A war happened and ended in the time. What is he doing?
Yeah. He was most prolific in the 70s. About 44 of those assaults happened within the 1970s. So that's when he was at sort of the height of his powers, if you like.
More opportunity as well.
Yeah, he was just doing more stuff. Now, there was parameters put on this investigation, rightly or wrongly. Well, rightly, because you have to define your terms, but I think there's an area of ripe here for sort of exploitation. So her investigation was into anything that happened, any sort of misdemeanours and assaults, and I said misdemeanour, I don't mean to minimise it. Any sort of like any of his
any bit of slap and tickle.
I don't mean that, fucking hell.
Just a bit of fun, innit? Eh?
Any heavy petting. No. Any of the assaults that happened. Now, it was on BBC premises or on location for the BBC, which means if you had a link to him through the BBC, but it didn't happen anywhere that they weren't doing an outside broadcast or on their premises, that wouldn't have been part of this investigation. And I think there'll be lots and lots of young women in particular who were assaulted, exploited, because they had originally made a link with him through the BBC. And not to mention, indirectly, in terms of the visibility he had from the BBC. So that was giving him access to Duncroft Girls' School, that was giving him access to Stoke Mandeville, etc., etc. But this focuses specifically on crimes that happened basically on their turf. Now, she said he committed offences in virtually every one of the BBC premises at which he worked. And he worked famously, was a grafter, he worked all over. I think part of that is part of, you know, like, a lot of serial killers do that as well, don't they? They keep moving. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can outrun the bad, or, you know, if you start to get a bit of a reputation, well, you don't go there for a year or two, and you go somewhere else, and then staff at the BBC, staff at any bigger corporation move on quite quickly. There's often quite high turnover.
Well, also, I guess there's that thing of, someone could have said, oh, Jimmy Savile did this to me on this date in this hospital, and he could, well, I wasn't actually there, I was in such and such a place.
She says...
Because he's keeping records.
Yeah, well, that is the other thing as well. She says that he would gratify himself sexually on BBC premises whenever the opportunity arose. So I think the fact that there was so many people working there and around him all the time... He'd basically do it when it was one-to-one. Or he'd be creepy the rest of the time, but he would assault people, grab them, grope them, you know, rape them when he was on his own with them. So the opportunity... That, to me, says if... Because when you'll know this, when you're on set for something, there's always someone fucking knocking on your door or mithering you. Like, there's always someone around.
Oh, either it'll be, you know, they're just checking something out. They're offering you something. Do you want a drink of tea? Do you want this? Do you want that? It's constant, constant checking.
Yeah. So, you know, I think if it wasn't for that culture of TV, which is, you know, sort of like, can I get you anything? And it's all coming from a lovely place, he would have assaulted a lot more people as well. Now... There's a really interesting thing that happens in that she is quite critical of the press and the public in terms of how they've perceived what happened at the BBC. So she basically said some people who came forward to the press embellished and lied about what happened, and I'll go over that in a second. And she said, and some of them came forward with sort of genuine stories, and the press didn't investigate them. And often the girls, in terms of reporting it within the BBC, the girls who spoke out were deemed to be a nuisance. And that would have been also him targeting, just like with Duncroft, girls that people wouldn't believe because they've got some vulnerability, like they're working class, or, you know, they're deemed to be a troublemaker. So you can get away with abuse.
Talking about me?
I am exactly talking about you, yeah. So he was, again, very careful about the victims that he selected. And... there's one really clear example of where... I'll read it from the report. So it's basically when people sort of speak out. Now, a girl comes forward. She's a very junior sort of employee. And she says, complaints were made. There were concerns. But not many considering how many incidents and how much abuse happened. Mm-hmm. And also, she was like... don't remove context from this. And she was like, the context is who made the complaints and who they made them to. Because at the end of this, investigation, she basically says there's a common misconception that the BBC as a corporation knew and allowed it to happen. And she said that also people think that the BBC covered it up. And that it's now become... There's so many press... like articles run on, the BBC knew and they covered it up and here's what happened and I spoke out and nothing happened. And that when you investigate them, and I'll get into these in a minute, have been thoroughly debunked, and it's newspapers largely lying and embellishing the truth. Or people going, I don't remember now because they're in their 80s, and I think some people are trying to clear their conscience. That now it's become the accepted fact that the BBC knew, they covered it up and they allowed him to do it. Whereas her claim, and she spends a really long time in this report trying to explain that most people don't know how TV works. So when someone is given a complaint, she basically said no one above a producer level knew. And she was saying, and that sounds like a big thing, right? Someone's a producer. But she was like, actually, in the scale of the BBC and the hierarchy, they're incredibly... Listen, any producers listening, I value your work. I'd love to work with you. But not if you're obviously one of the Savile ones. But the producers, are quite in the scheme of things, going up to sort of the Director General, incredibly low down the rankings. And so she's going, no one senior knew about this. No one who had the power to do anything knew about this.
Well... In 1973, though, the Radio 1 controller, Douglas Muggeridge, he had heard rumours and he wanted an investigation. So he was like, well, I've heard these rumours. And he spoke to people that worked on Fleet Street for the papers. And they said, well, we've heard rumours, but there's been no police interest. So he's like, well, I'm going to set up a meeting. And he sets up a meeting with Jimmy Savile. And, of course, Jimmy Savile says it's all bullshit.
Woof.
So there was somebody who knew, Paul Gambaccini, who, if you remember, he was a DJ.
Yeah.
He was wrongly accused in Operation U-Tree.
Really?
Remember? Yeah, I felt really bad for him. So Paul Gambaccini, he worked next door to the production team who made Savile's Travels. And they said to him, when we go and we make these programmes, he's going off with an institutionalised young woman.
Oish.
I mean, that is just a vulnerable child.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. And Paul Gambaccini didn't report it because he was like, well, they're producers, they're higher up than me. I'm a junior member of staff at this point. He's like, I just don't think anyone will believe me.
And I also think at those times, there wasn't anything in place to know who you would go to and what you would say.
Exactly.
People didn't always have the language of child abuse and paedophilia at those times. And then outside of that, now most places have HR and they have a complaints thing and they have a whistleblower policy. But not in the 60s and 70s. Everything was just still everyone smoking indoors and everything run by sort of old white men.
Yeah. Well, the other thing as well, I mean, if you think about it, so from when he worked in dance halls, he was known to be an abuser. He was known to be handsy and weird. And then it was known that he was into young girls, or children, as I like to call them. But he always had a camper van with him or a Range Rover with a mattress in the back. So the BBC knew that he had these things. Martin Young, who was a reporter who joined him on one of his sort of runs around the UK that he was doing, he sort of joined him for a little bit on one section of it. And he found him in a camper van with a teenager. But they were both fully clothed, and he thought, he didn't think anything of it. He was like, oh, well, they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
But then a chap called Bob Langley, he said he saw two young girls aged around 12 to 13 leaving his Jimmy Savile's caravan. And when Savile came out of the caravan, he indicated that he'd had sex with them both. But Bob Langley didn't believe him. He just thought, oh, he's joking.
Yeah.
Because he just didn't think that would happen.
Yeah.
It's gross.
Yeah.
It's gross.
It's really common as well. And it's very interesting how the papers have sort of dealt with it. I'll give an example here. So the headline is, A top TV director has revealed he blew the whistle on Jimmy Savile having sex with a young girl at the Beeb, but was ignored. David Nicholson, now 67, caught the perv in his Jim will fix it dressing room with a girl aged 16, maybe 15, that's in quote marks, and his bosses told him, this is in quote marks, that's the way it goes. So, Dame Janet Smith contacted him and said, let's talk about the story, and he went, no, I did not say that to the Sun. And she said, first he said he hadn't seen the couple having intercourse, and then he said, and I didn't tell the Sun that I had either. And then he said, I saw them standing up. They're about a metre or two away from each other. They're both clothed. And the girl was like 16 or 17. So that's already older than what the headline is. And she was sort of smoothing down her clothes. She looked confused and embarrassed, but not distressed. And he hadn't reported the incident to anyone in the authority or at the BBC. And he said, I thought he was grubby and offensive guy, but I didn't report anything. And then Dame Janet Smith added, he said that he did not express the outrage attributed to him in the Sun article. Oh, and then she said that he'd got in contact with the Sun, but like never mentioned this dressing room thing. And certainly never said, I told the BBC and no one did anything about it. And then when she asked the Sun to go, oh, cool, can you give me your shorthand notes or recordings to back this up? They were like, oh, we haven't got any. But no, he definitely said that. Mm. And then she said...
Well, you can't believe the Sun.
Well, exactly. She said, my conclusion on the balance of probabilities is that Mr. Nicholson did not report what he had seen in the dressing room to anyone in authority at the BBC, and that he did not do so for the reasons he both gave in evidence to me and his email to the Sun reporter. Basically, that Jimmy was a star, that he hadn't really seen anything, and he didn't know who to report it to. She says it follows that the public should not rely on this article as evidence that the BBC was told about the dressing room incident and turned a blind eye. And then there's loads of these. There's like the Mirror did one. The Mirror have done a couple. The Daily Express have done one. The Telegraph, the Daily Mail. That's like every newspaper basically covered it and said this happened as it's fact. And then when you dig into it, the person who's meant to have given them that lead or given that interview is like, that's not what I said. And they all sort of go, and it was the BBC who did it. And it is, other than the Mirror, mainly right-wing papers who are obviously anti-BBC.
Well, I'm going to say something here. The Sun, obviously, is a disgusting rag of a paper. It's an appalling tabloid. Here's something I'm going to say. I'm going to go on record and say this, because this is something that happened this week. So a lot of people for the Edinburgh Fringe get PR for their shows. Mm-hmm. But obviously, some PRs have gone to the Sun, and the Sun have run a few, here's our pick of the Edinburgh Fringe things, and the people have shared this. And I'm like, hang on a minute. A lot of the people that have shared this, I've been recommended in the Sun, are people that are very high up with, very, right on with social justice, very this is wrong, that's wrong, and, would be the first to pull anybody else up if they so much as do a slight thing wrong. Mm-hmm. But it's all right for you to share. It's okay for you to share the fucking Sun now, is it? A racist, misogynistic rag. But because it said your show's all right, you fucking go for it.
Also, having never seen it.
Huh?
They like when you do a PR, you pay a PR and they pitch the shows, and then they largely, sometimes based on your press shot, decide what makes the top 10 shows to see. Or, or maybe you've been on a TV show that they like. They've never seen the shows to recommend them. Yeah,
but also, why, if your show is recommended in the Sun, and are you so fucking hypocritical and so desperate for attention that you now think that's okay, that you will share that, go, hey, well, it's like, no, sorry. You either have backbone and scruples or you don't. And it seems to me that you don't.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, if lovely Lily that does my PR, absolute angel of a woman. I mean, I don't think she'd do this anyway. If she said, I'm going to go to this, I'd be like, no fucking thank you. There are things you don't need in life, and the approval of a publication like The Sun is one of them.
Yeah.
So, this is the thing we live with, this is the world we're in. I mean, back then when they were printing that, you can't believe anything that is written in a tabloid paper like The Sun.
Agreed.
End of.
There's another example here of where Dame Janet Smith is actually quite, not pro BBC, but I think she's having, in quite a BBC way, extreme levels of balance. She's basically going, this is really bad, it happened, but no one who could do anything about it was ever told. But she is critical in her sort of summing up. She also talks about, here's the thing that she cites specifically in the article. She says, in the investigation, she says, Richard Littlejohn of the Daily Mail, another awful person.
Oh, God, him.
On the 12th of September 2013, he said that the senior...
He's a one-man rage machine.
It really is. It must be exhausting being him. His blood pressure's insane. She said her senior BBC colleagues stand accused of being complicit in Saville's crimes on corporation premises. And she said, this is where she goes, no, you need to stop saying things like this, because no one above a producer knew. But the problem is most people don't know what a producer does. They don't know how the BBC works. And she just says there wasn't a cover-up, and it's really unhelpful to perpetuate that. Because also it means you don't fix the problem. If they think the problem is a cover-up, you're not fixing the problem with it's actually institutional failings in terms of being able to report things and a cultural problem. It has led to one of my favourite things to look at on YouTube, though. Have you seen the videos of people refusing to pay their television licence and then chasing the oh my God, Rachel. So someone will knock on and be like, hello, they'll immediately start filming, and then they'll open up and be like, hello, I'm here to investigate your TV licence. And they're like, are you asking me why I'm not paying for a paedophile ring? And then they immediately start haranguing this poor TV licence enforcement person, chasing them down the street saying, you're a paedophile, you're part of a paedophile ring, and just making their lives a fucking misery. Yeah, but it is highly watchable, I will say that.
I mean, I can understand people being fucked off, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah. But I think that's people who never want to pay for anything anyway, and now they have a great excuse not to. That is my cynical view on it.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
I'll give you an example of the kind of things that happen. So one of the first complaints was made by a telephone operator in Manchester. A lot of this happens at BBC Manchester, and obviously with Stuart Hall, that's where all his crimes took place. So it's the late 60s. There's a young woman working there on the telephones, and she says, oh, can I have your autograph to Jimmy Savile? And he says, oh, if you give me a kiss. And he points to his cheek, and as she goes in to kiss, he turns and kisses her on the lips. Now, she went and told her supervisor what had happened, but she also says, oh, I didn't expect them to do anything about it. I was just sort of telling, that guy, sort of, that fucking creepy Jimmy Savile, stole a kiss, basically. And then Janet Smith signs off with, given what had happened and the way in which the report was made, I don't criticise the supervisor for taking no action. So especially if you, not that I'm saying this is right, but if you put this in the context of the 60s, and this young girl is like, oh, Jimmy Savile, I asked him for an autograph, and he said, oh, if I get a kiss, and then he kissed me on the lips. Like, if you're not trained in safeguarding and what's appropriate, that you would just be like, oh God, what an old creep. Not as opposed to, how are you feeling? Do you need a mental health first aider? Do you need me to escalate this? What do you want me to do about this situation? Like all the things that people would now know to sort of enact. At the time, it just wasn't a thing. And she does. So here's a great example. So in 1969, Savile sexually assaulted a woman. He basically grabbed her boobs. And then it says, and then he was rude to her. And be like, I think he was rude to her when he grabbed the boobs. God. Now, she told the managers above her, they were both men and women, those managers. So, not in one person. I mean, as in, like, there was male management and female management. Now, she says the reaction of the managers was to show no surprise and to suggest that it would have been more surprising if Savile had tried not to touch her.
Tried to
touch her, yeah. So obviously,
right, okay. So now as women, we've got to feel shit about ourselves,
indeed,
because Jimmy Savile didn't want to abuse us.
Well, I can't decide if that's like, oh, you should be glad that someone's paying attention to you, or oh, well, with Jimmy, you should. I'd be amazed if he didn't. I can't decide which. Oh,
you've got to be a real minger if Jimmy's not touching you. Oof.
Now, she signs off with, that was an inappropriate reaction, but one which is not surprising given the culture of the time. So again, 1969, like, I think that, that means, when people say, you had it even fucking recent with Me Too, and be like, oh, well, I'd love to be wolf whistled, and be like, that's not really the fight of Me Too, is like, oh, well, I didn't mind people patting my bum. I took it as a compliment and be like, okay, well, we're not really talking about that, are we?
I miss the days that you could go into the BBC and, I used to love being dragged into a dressing room and a man in a tracksuit forcing himself on me. You can't do anything anymore, can you? I miss those days.
Yeah, mad fucking... And when I hear women talk about it as well, in particular like that, I'm like, you fucking... You know what it reminds me of with this circuit of... just because you experienced it on the circuit, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't insist that other people go through it as a rite of passage. And I have to remind myself of that a bit when I'm a bit... you see someone who's like... kind of feels like they've leapfrogged doing actual gigs or clubs, and I'm like, that's okay, just because I did it and that's a very hard way to do it doesn't, like you and I both do it and did it, like it doesn't mean that it should be that hard. And I think it's useful, but in many ways that like there's not one way to do it. And I hate it when, here's a great example of someone we know, I'm sure I've told this before, when you're starting out in comedy, loads of car shares, and you split the petrol money, and often none of you are getting paid, but sometimes there's a headliner or there's an MC, they'll be getting paid. And in the days where we'd split the petrol, if there was an open spot, i.e. someone who's not being paid, I would cut them out of the split. So say there's 4 of us and there's 2 open spots, I would split the petrol between me and the headliner or me and the MC, because those kids aren't being paid and they're working for free. And there was a guy who had a big eye. He was like, well, I used to have to pay. No, they should have to pay. And I was like, don't be such a tight cunt. And
Who said that? Who was it? Oh, of course it fucking was. Of course it was him. Look, of course it was fucking him.
He said, no, I had to pay when I was an open spot. And I said, yeah, and you remember how shit that was and how bankrupting it was. So let's not put that onto someone else. And he just couldn't see that. He's like, I did it, so they should have to. Whereas I thought, like, my thing was like, I did it, it was rubbish. Why would I pass on that burden to, like, the next generation? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it to me, it's just how that should be. You're getting paid for the gig. The newer act is in the car. You don't make them pay for petrol.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing that I used to hate. Jonglers. Comedy club, now long dead. Good. You'd go there and you'd do an open spot, and obviously you're not getting paid, so you paid your train fare to get there, you're doing 10 minutes for free, you're working for free, you've done a day's work at your job, and you didn't get offered any food, so that the big acts, the acts that were getting paid would be offered food and you wouldn't.
Well,
and this culture of the beers in the fridge are actually for the
well, we'll just say it because they don't do it now. But when I first started doing the Comedy Store, they would wait for an open spot, like an unpaid act, to open a beer and be like, those aren't for you, they're for the proper acts. And they would sort of goad them into it so they would get to say that. But now I think it's like, well, now the difference is now the headline.
No, it still happens in London.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, not when I'm hosting. Well, for a start, I don't drink.
What I say is, with the open spot, and I did this the other weekend, I said, oh, just so you know, I'm not drinking those beers, so if you want those beers, you go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I do. I'm like, oh, I don't drink, you can have mine. Oh my God, how small does your cock have to be? And I mean metaphorically here, I'm not trying to fucking body shame anyone. I mean, how small does the cock in your mind have to be for you to wait for someone?
No, I am. It will be physical. It will be the actual penis.
But
and if anyone gets in touch to complain about that, how small is your fucking dick that you want to complain about me talking about small fucking dicks, you little dick weirdo.
Rachel, fucking hell.
What? I'm sick of it. Fuck them. Fucking tiny dick freaks, man.
Yes, I think it's exactly that sort of... Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. But also, from us being in that situation, where, a lot of the time, and hopefully I think it's changing, a lot of the time you weren't very welcome in the dressing room.
No.
And maybe, 10 years ago, when we were doing this, 10 years probably, it was mainly the older boys, the bigger boys, the older comedians. Maybe the culture of that exists with them a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just not very nice. I mean, just make someone feel welcome. If you imagine someone's first day at actual work, say you're working in an office and somebody joins and you're like, yeah, we have a cup of tea at 11 in the morning, but you can't have one. because you've just started working here. Yeah, you're new, so you can't do that. It's bullshit. Just make people feel welcome. Just be normal, you know?
Agreed.
People are mad.
It's just exerting their power, isn't it?
And speaking of which, I must say as well, first of all, I made a mistake because I did say Jim will fix it add up to 12 million views. It was actually 20 million.
All right, that's good.
So that's more.
That's like a third of the country.
Secondly, what I will say as well, so, and I want to get this across because I think, obviously Jimmy Savile abused a lot of women, but he abused a lot of men as well, and boys.
Yeah.
So there's a horrible story here, and I really wanted to get this story on here because I just think it's so sad and disgusting and horrible. There was an episode of Jim Will Fix It where a scout, what do you call them, scout troop? What's it called? Bunch of scouts, fucking bunch of scouts, from East London wrote into Jim Will Fix It, and they wanted to do a milk float race. And all these little lads were excited to be on Jim Will Fix It. And they got one big Jim Will Fix It medal between them, which not cricket in my opinion. You know, this is who
you and your fucking medals, man.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say this is the Hackney Half Marathon all over again, right? This is what. Listen, individual medals. Give people the medal. Anyway, so
was Sadiq Khan at the Hackney Half Marathon?
He was, not this year, the year before. He said something really weird. Did I tell you this?
Yeah, I think you did, yeah. Because I gigged at the fantastic Hay Festival, and I was chatting to someone who's actually a former, she used to run a prison. She was good value. And just as I was introducing that to the stage, I was like, I know that fucking guy behind her. I was like, Sadiq Khan, for fuck's sake. Which is so weird to gig with, like, the Mayor of London in this second row.
Fucking Sadiq Khan. I'm glad you're enjoying your time at Hay Festival, taking in a bit of culture. Come back here to the fucking London Borough of Waltham Forest, mate, and have a look at these parking restrictions.
It's not one or the other, mate. It's not gone.
No, it is in my... Listen, get... Mr. Khan, I want a fucking word, mate.
Listen, Rachel, Hay is actually a festival of ideas. Bill Clinton referred to it as the Woodstock of ideas, which is on there.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. He said it's the Woodstock of ideas. So maybe he's just coming over there to get some good ideas on how to increase parking in Waltham Forest.
If he was there for that, then fair play. He didn't know. He just said something really weird at the Hackney Half. Not last this year, the year before. He said, "My daughter's running the half marathon, so if you see a very good-looking girl with the surname Khan, that's my daughter." I was like, that's a bit fucking weird, Sadiq.
Yeah.
The Scouts, though, it wasn't just about the medal, right? It was actually worse than that. So this poor lad, this young lad, and he's actually, you see him as a little boy on the clip from the thing, just a little boy, probably about 7, 8, maybe a bit younger. Just a really sweet little boy. And Jimmy Savile says, "Oh, would you like your own medal?" And he says, "Yes, please," because who wouldn't want their own medal, Hackney Half? And he says to him, "Oh, come to my dressing room." And the little lad goes to his dressing room and he abuses him.
Fucking hell.
In the dressing room. I hate it. I just think it's absolutely disgusting. And the poor child, of course, is too frightened to say anything.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as a child, you probably think, I don't really understand what's just happened.
No. The complaints that were made against Jimmy Savile, there's another example here of there was she was like a junior employee at Television Centre. He put his hand inside her skirt and up her leg, and then when he left, the supervisor returned and she said what had happened, and the supervisor said, "Keep your mouth shut, he's a VIP." Now the supervisor was apparently not shocked.
A very important paedophile.
Yeah. But apparently the supervisor wasn't like, "Oh my God," was like, "Just shut up." So basically, in this Janet Smith report, Dame Janet Smith review.
Yes.
She's sort of explaining, here's examples of how nothing ever got to complaint level, so they couldn't do anything about it because she basically says, in none of these incidences did the complaint result in any formal investigation. Nowadays, one would expect that each of the reported incidents, and I only read out 3 and there's 5, would be treated with a proper degree of concern. It appears to me that the culture of the times within and without the BBC was such that incidents of this kind were not treated seriously, and as a result, I'm not surprised that none of these are investigated in full. But there were 3 occasions that someone outside the BBC complained about Savile. One was this poor girl. They're like, you going to Top of the Pops? So she's in school. She's like 16. She turns up. She's got hot pants on and this like long coat. And then a guy with a clipboard was like, oh, if you go onto the podium with Jimmy Savile and you can be with him during the recording. She was like, great. So she's standing next to him and suddenly she feels a hand on her waist and then underneath her coat. It unzips the back of her hot pants and he shoves his hand in her knickers and like grabs her bum. So she panics. Ugh. She runs to the guy with the clipboard, is crying and says what happened. And then someone else comes over to there's another guy comes over to this crying girl. And they kept going, oh, no. It's just obviously the zips just come down. This is, you're mistaken, basically. You've imagined it. And then a security guy was called and escorts her off the premises. Now, she was just 16-year-old kid in London. We don't know if she's even from there. So taken out, just left on the street. And in this report, she's like, I haven't been able to find the floor staff that were involved. But obviously this is hugely serious assault on a really young, innocent girl. And it wasn't dealt with properly. That was a proper complaint. And that should have been escalated to a manager or the producer. But she said, I think that the floor staff at the time just thought, oh, well, this is just Jimmy having a bit of like fun. And the girl was being a nuisance, which is that word nuisance comes up again and again in all of this. Ugh. And again, there's another example of like this complaint is a girl, Top of the Pops, she sits on some staging and then he stands up behind her and starts doing a bit to camera and she feels his hand going under her bum and she jumps up in the air. And she says that she sort of like, she like jolts up and as she sits down again, his hand was right underneath her. And she says fiddling with her is the phrase she uses. She goes to find someone from the BBC, a man with like some earphones on. She said exactly what happened. And he went, oh, don't worry, that's just Jimmy Savile mucking about. And she was like, no, that's not okay. And they were like, move out the way, we're trying to get the cameras past. So it's...
Actually, I just don't understand why all the protection of him. Like, yeah, everyone goes, oh, he was a powerful man with connections, but as an institution, the BBC is bigger than him.
Yeah. Well, but the problem is they're telling people that feel like they have no power and that he's in the hierarchy, right? He's right up there. He's right up there with you've got to be basically think that either the people that know have this more collective power or you have got more power than the person who's being accused. So a floor manager or a security guard, not that I'm saying it's right, and especially when there's no established way of reporting, they've got to think, I've got more power than Jimmy Savile. There's no way they think they're going to lose their jobs because I think other stars at the BBC didn't know as well. There's a really interesting interview with Paul O'Grady, R.I.P., fucking the best of us, who he talks about Jimmy Savile. And he is really critical of the press because he has this is mad, he has sort of an interaction with Jimmy Savile. So it basically said, I worked in a children's home in West Kirby in the 70s and Jimmy Savile came to visit. One of the house mothers was told not to let him unsupervised on the girls' unit. Now, at the time, we thought it was because he didn't want to be on his own with the kids, that he wanted a member of staff to talk to. We had no idea. We were so naive. I wouldn't have even known what a paedophile was. Now, that's in the 70s, and that's fucking Paul O'Grady, who's not naive, is he? You know, he's like wise to the world.
Yes.
But then he follows up and he says, it's now being used as a stick to beat the BBC with. I have never even heard a whisper of it at the Beeb. If I got a whiff, even then, that someone was in a dressing room with a girl of 14, I'd have reported it. I'd have confronted them. But this is the thing is, Paul O'Grady, when he was at the BBC, would have been coming in at a higher level. So, like, It's basically everyone without power potentially knew about it. And anyone with power didn't. And he was the thing stopping it getting to the people in power. That's what I think.
But then you've got Johnny Rotten.
Oh, yeah. And David Icke.
Yeah, Johnny Rotten said on a TV show, was it in the 70s, when the Sex Pistols were at the height of their fame, he said about Jimmy Savile being a wrong 'un.
Yeah.
Right? I'm paraphrasing, but the clip's out there.
But also, in that situation...
But then, years later, when he's being interviewed by Piers Morgan, he says, yeah, everybody knew. I'd heard about it.
But... again, like, and not that I'm defending the BBC because I'll I'll summarise with my own experience of something adjacent but not the same. At that time, Johnny Rotten was like, oh, fucking wild card. No one thought the Sex Pistols would last. So he's again quite low power. So yeah, of course, because he knew producers and runners and floor, like if you're coming in low level at the BBC, everyone around you would know, and it would be an open secret. But if you're coming in, or if you're at the top, it might never have reached you. Not that I am saying the BBC is perfect and great. I think it's a horrible fucking hard lesson for a big institution, just like the NHS, for a big institution to learn these lessons at the expense of these children. Yeah.
On the subject of the Sex Pistols, just a little story about this. I've got a fan of the Sex Pistols, got a Never Mind the Bollocks t-shirt. And the other week when I was away in Newcastle, I was like, I might wear that for my gig tonight. But it was creased, and I thought, can't iron a fucking Sex Pistols t-shirt, can you? How unfucking punk is that? I'm just going to iron my Sex Pistols t-shirt. I was like, I'll wear something else. It's so uncool, isn't it? Oh, just iron me Sex Pistols. Never mind the bollocks.
Deeply uncool.
Here's the Sex Pistols, hello.
Oh, funny.
The other thing I was going to say, so hospitals as well. Reading the Dan Davies book, In Plain Sight, the Jimmy Savile, The Life and Lies of Jimmy Savile, very good book. I've read it a couple of times and I'm going through it again, and there's always something that you miss. It's very much the Happy Like Murderers of paedophile books. There's a couple of things in it that I was like, oh God, this is where I found out about the advertising shoes. If I hadn't read it in that book, I wouldn't have believed it when I saw it. So I saw there's a bit where a girl has been abused by Jimmy Savile, and she goes to tell the nurse because she's been put on an adult ward. She goes to tell the nurses, and the nurse laughs at her.
Fuck hell.
That's awful. I mean, that made me feel fucking physically sick. And a bit later on, the girl says that she knew they must have known because in the night there was an elderly woman opposite this kid. As I say, she's been put on an adult ward for some reason. And Jimmy Savile walked into the ward, jumped onto the bed and just lay on top of the woman. Like dead weight on top of her. Until the nurse comes over and shouts, you shouldn't be in here, Jimmy.
Fucking hell.
So they knew, and they laughed.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's a laugh of nervous... But at the end of the day, you're in a position of power and you laughed at a child that came to you that had been abused.
Yeah.
So you should be... I hope you're fucking uncomfortable in your graves now.
Well, I think people have done a lot of mental gymnastics to sort of absolve themselves from it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. There's some things that I just can't be diplomatic about, and that's one of them.
No, I totally agree. I think it's also people do a thing of... A bit like what's happening at the moment with Eamon Holmes and Philip Schofield, is that they are trying to sort of, like, distance themselves from it by going, oh, they were awful. So, like, it was an open secret and they didn't do anything. So here's a great example. The Daily Express in October 2012 published an article saying that BBC managers knew Savile was abusing children. And it said, Christopher Biggins believes the BBC should be held to account over the Jimmy Savile scandal, calling it the worst kept secret in show business. Now, Dame Janet Smith then goes, great, okay, I'm going to go and interview Christopher Biggins. And she says, well, I do not criticise the Express for publishing its piece. It's unfortunate that the article in particular, the headline, gives us the impression that Mr. Biggins had actual knowledge of the matters of which he was speaking. He's assured us that he did not. So basically he's gone, oh, it was an open secret. And that the managers, that those people should be held to account. And she was like, oh, okay, so who knew about it that we should be holding to account? And he's like, oh, well, people just knew about it. And she's like, okay, but who? Who could have done something about it? And then he's like, oh, well, just everyone knew. And it's like, well, no, what you're saying is you knew, and other people who couldn't do anything, or felt like they couldn't do anything about it, knew. And that's not the same thing. So I just think it's easy to go, and I've got to say, like, this isn't me be like someone who works at the BBC desperately defending the BBC. I like, as I say, I will make it really clear that I think that there's it's a huge failing, and it will happen again. I'm telling you, it will happen again. Something like this, and something is like this that's happening. But
sorry to interrupt.
Well, no, I can see how it's happened.
Well, what I will say about the BBC is this thing of like, yeah, I work for the BBC as well. It's a public funded thing.
Yeah,
you've every right to criticise it. You've every right to say that was fucking wrong and it shouldn't be happening, especially when you're meant to be there as a you know, an information and entertainment network for the people who pay for it, you know? As you say as well, the BBC is such a big fucking place, big institution. There's thousands and thousands of people that work for it, so many different departments. Which, like, I'm not asked about criticising the BBC. I think it's absolutely fine to do so. In this scenario, if you were diplomatic about this, there's something wrong with your head.
Well, I think that people might listen to this and hear me sort of. I'm not trying to defend the BBC. I'm trying to add context of how and why I think it happened. But then ultimately, I promise I am going to be critical. I just don't want people to be like, is she apologising for the BBC? But I also think
no, of course you're not. Of course you're not. But you know, this is it. It's such a big thing. Yeah. You know, it's such a huge, what's the word, institution?
Yeah.
You know, it's such a big thing for people in this country, the BBC. And as I've said, it's funded by the people.
Yeah.
You're saying this is a terrible thing that happened in something that was meant to be a public thing,
well,
like the people.
I don't think it's any coincidence that he was running, like, riot at the BBC and the NHS, two institutions that have a huge amount of trust from the people of Britain because of what they represent. Yes. He was hiding behind their reputation to get away with what he was doing.
You know, and I'm not saying one's worse than the other, but fuck me. You know, it's disgusting that he was doing this at the BBC. And it's absolutely appalling that he was doing this in hospitals. In a place where, you know, people should be safe at work and people visiting the BBC should have been safe. But people in fucking hospital at like a time in their lives that they need to feel safe
and heal and
and get well and feel looked after.
Yeah.
That he's going in doing this.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to say on it.
Well, I feel like I've done too many teasers for this now, but it's not. So there was something that happened, I think we've spoken about it, so there's a few people that like. So I used to always be like, I won't perform with anyone that I know has abused anyone. And I sort of still have that view. But ultimately, like, to be absolutely truthful, there are so many of them that I can't afford, like, especially because I pay for Get Off. By the way, if you want to throw some money our way, fantastic, you can donate on the website. So Get Off is an independent HR set up to deal with sexual harassment in live comedy, and I pay for it, and it costs me thousands every month to pay for it, right? So at some point, this sort of like drained, because by the way, clubs are meant to pay for it, and they largely don't. They just don't give a shit. Until someone gets assaulted, and then we get loads of people going, how do we sign up for this again? Joke's on them, because the law's about to change, and someone is going to get fucking massively sued for tens of thousands because of their negligence. Anyway.
Really?
Yeah. Now the law is changing, so that if you have to have shown basically that you've gone to an effort to stop anything occurring on your premises, in your institution. So basically engaging with us would be one of those ways. But if they're not doing anything, which loads of them do, as we know, and, you know, like booking someone that they know that there's rumours about, that kind of thing, that it will be tens and tens of thousands if someone basically pursues it legally, which they're well within their rights to. Anyway. So I was always like, can't, if there was a whisper about someone, I wouldn't work with them. And now I'm like, I can't actually fucking afford to do that. There you go, I can't. And especially when I'm trying to be like, well, can someone, because there are whispers and rumours, and then it's like I've heard something that's like, not that's happened to me, but something I know, say it happened to you, and then I'll hear it back and I'm like, well, that isn't what happened. So by the time something gets to me and I'm like, well, whoever this is, can they speak to me directly so I know what it is so I can either raise it with a production company or do this or do that or do that. But it hasn't happened. So I've been like, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing this bit of work then. So there was an incident at the BBC where I turned up at something, and there was someone working on it that I know to be someone who has assaulted someone I know. And I didn't know they were going to be a part of it. So I took one of the very lower down assistant producers, who is a really good egg, and I said, listen, I don't want to work with this person because of this. And I don't think I outlined it. I was like, I just can't be seen to be working with this person. It's not okay. And you know why as well? In the person who was assaulted, I I sort of had known that sort of rumour, or they had written it on their Facebook, and then I had turned up to do something that was just in my diary as a PR thing, and it was with this comic, and I was like, oh, and I should have not done it, but it was that fucking, I was being the person working for the Sun at Edinburgh. I was like, oh well, this might sell some tickets, and I just hadn't really thought about it until I was like on my way to the gig, and I was like, oh, fuck, I can't pull it out now, So I wrote to this person who had put that status up about being assaulted and said, listen, I'm really sorry, I work with this person, and I got like whatever 50 quid to do it, and I was like, so I gave 50 quid to a survivors charity and another one to a charity that I know is close to them, and said, I'm really sorry, that wasn't good enough, and I didn't like, and that must have, I don't even know this person that well, but I was like, it sort of diminishes what you went through, and I'm really sorry about that. And they sent a very nice one back. Did they then proceed to book someone and work with someone who abused me? Absolutely, but anyway, so I said, listen, I can't work with this person. And they were like, okay, leave it with me. So then they go and get the execs. So these are like the producers with some power. I think one was a producer, maybe one was an exec, or they're both producers. So these are the people who sort of run the ship. And it was a man and a woman. And I sat down with them and said, they were like, so what's going on? And I was like, I don't want to work with this person because I was like, for a start, they have a super injunction, which we all know about, right?
I didn't know that.
Oh, really? Yeah, there's a super injunction that... Don't you remember that a sort of comedy blog ran a piece of it, and it was like, who's this comedian? And they used they cut out, like, literally around their head. So if you're really good at silhouettes, you would know who it was. So there's a...
Oh, okay.
Of them being in sort of like a very similar sort of dynamic to Philip Schofield, in that it was like a much younger person, a sort of abuse of power, but that young person went on to take their life. And so there's all sorts of like dodgy stuff there. I'm not saying this person is a murderer, I'm saying that there was an abusive power dynamic, and that young person is no longer with us. And then they had assaulted someone anyhow. So I sort of said all this. And the woman was like, okay, so where's the police incident number for this? And I was like, I don't have that. I don't carry that around, that police incident number. And they were like, well, it's very hard to do anything. And, is that actually proof? And then I got a bit ratty, and I was like, I can go and ask the person they assaulted to come here and explain it to your face if you want. And they were like, oh, no, it's fine. And they went, well, how about you just sneak in the back and you can do the job from there, and then we'll say you had to leave early. And I was like, no, I'm not lying to like work around this person. I said, I'm just not gonna do it. And it was fucking, do you know what? It was like 300 quid, which in Edinburgh is like $3,000. That's a lot of money now, let alone in Edinburgh when you're on the bones of your ass. I needed that money, but I was like, I've just got to take a stand. And I just went away. I said, I'm really sorry, I can't do it. And they were like, right, well, I don't know what we're going to say about this, and I don't know what we've announced and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I just remember sitting there being like, I'm so sorry. And me apologising again and again and again, and feeling like a cunt for doing it. And then I left, and I texted the other producer, it was the man, and said, oh, like, I'm really sorry if I threw you, like, I didn't mean to make your life hard. I know it's difficult producing stuff, and I've just sort of made a problem. And they were really lovely, and they were like, no, I know it would have taken a lot to say something there, and like, thanks for speaking up, and that must have been really difficult. But what surprised me was it was the woman who was sort of really like, well, what's this now? And okay, so it's not, unless there's an actual sort of like conviction, it's very hard for us to do anything. And I could see that, right? But at the same time, I was like, but the BBC has got a fucking reputation of ignoring rumours at its own detriment, and people being, made incredibly vulnerable as a result. So I'm like, if any organisation should be a bit hot on the old, okay, well, if there's dodgy rumours, let's move away. It's the BBC. I just couldn't believe it.
If there's a rumour, investigate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that simple. Investigate. And then at least you've done something.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is that thing of, the classic thing of, it's very difficult because if something is around as a rumour, there is that thing of like, sometimes a rumour is just a rumour as well. Yeah. And sometimes that can really fucking ruin somebody. Yeah. There's that double-edged sword of, if we went off every time we got told a bit of gossip in comedy, for example, if we took all of that as like, well, that's 100% true, people would be, terrible things would have happened to people. But I do think if someone's come to somebody with a substantial rumour, I think then if you want to work with this person, then you should do an investigation. There you go. It's that simple. Investigate.
Well, I also just think, okay, if you want to work with them, absolutely fine. I want to see a fucking risk assessment of how, if you know that these are rumours, how have you mitigated for that risk? Like, how have you gone, you know, okay, say you want to work with that talent. Say there's rumours about me and that I prey on young guys when they're drunk. So you go, we'll hire you for this job, Kiri, but you can't...
I know it's not funny, but I just can't imagine it. Carry on.
But they should go, okay, we really want Kiri for this job, which, by the way, wouldn't happen because if it was a woman with any fucking rumours, they just wouldn't hire her. So... So they go...
Absolutely.
We really want Kiri, so we're going to hire Kiri, but in her Kiri's contract, she has to go home straight after the show. She can't attend the green room afterwards. She can't attend the parties afterwards. And there can be nowhere where she's socialising with alcohol. And she has to either agree to that in her contract or she doesn't work on it. And that's how you go. But go like... oh, we know this is a problem and we're going to fucking manage it if we're going to take the risk on booking it. Or you could, I don't know, book women and it would be less of a fucking problem. But anyway.
Well, I completely agree with that, yeah.
So that is Jimmy Savile and the BBC. I hope it didn't sound too much like I was endlessly defending the BBC, but I think it is important to try and, just like with everything, like with Duncroft, to have those, like, to try and present all sides of why it was so complicated as well.
Will this ever end, is what I want to know.
Fucking tell me about it. That's what you should have got your tattoo of. Fuck that little cat or whatever you got, or your woman's head. Will this ever end just around an ankle?
Will this ever... Imagine if I just got Jimmy Savile as a tattoo, which people did do. We'll get to that later on.
God. Thank you for listening. Our Hackney Halloween show, which is the biggest show we have ever done, is on sale, nearly sold out. And it's in Halloween. Our Fringe show is on sale as well. And that, again, very, 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 very busy.
Yeah.
So if you want to come and see us, book for those soon.
One show only.
One show only. One show only.
I'm on tour from September.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, wherever you live in the UK, I'll be somewhere near you. If you live in Corby, fucking pull your fingers out.
Oh, yeah, Corby. Yeah, it's a famously tough one.
You know, it's very sobering, isn't it? After a few years, you go, do you know what? I'm really happy with where I am. And then you do a bigger tour and you go, oh, wow. It's mad, isn't it? You go, well, flipping heck. Only 2 people like me there.
Oh.
But these things happen. It's fine, you know? I've come to the conclusion that every show now, as we are still deep in a cost of living crisis, you know, I've got to the thing where I think, you know what? It's the days when I started out and there used to be like 3 people there to watch me. I appreciate those 3 people and still do. But as we're getting into the cost of living crisis, every audience member I really appreciate more and more now. Because everyone's skin.
Yeah,
and then
the money means
do
more.
A good show.
Yeah, because like it's like instead of, you know, say they come to see you and it's 15 quid. Actually, like with how expensive everything, that's actually like they've paid 30 quid to see you. Like you're a fucking stadium act.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
And let me tell you, this show, I'm really enjoying writing it without the pressure of Edinburgh on me. Enjoying myself. I am going to give you a good time.
Goodness me, what a promise.
Anyway, tour's on sale. Manchester, loads of tickets sold. Please do come and see me there. I'm everywhere. Manchester, London. It's all on my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Come and see me.
If you want to come to a Swap Don't Shop event as well, we've got one in Bristol on the 7th of July.
That'll be a good
8th
one.
of July, apologies. Same day as Bristol Pride. It's in the morning, so you can come along, get some new threads, and then go to Bristol Pride. It will be a good one. It's only a small venue, so get some tickets for that. It's all on my Linktree on my Instagram, and there's like 4 tickets left for the London one at the end of June, at the end of this month, which is...
Aren't you doing one? You're doing one in Cardiff, aren't you?
Not until like November, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's weird. It's on the same day as my tour show.
All right, well, come along.
I'll come along.
Yeah,
so you can swap, don't shop in the morning.
Yeah.
And you can come and see me in the evening.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, 25th of June at the London Welsh Centre, and that's like 300 of you coming. I think we've got 4 tickets left. Again,
is that the church?
No, it's not. It's not. It's
Have you seen that Welsh church? It's lovely, isn't
in
it?
Soho. It's mad, isn't it? No, this is by King's Cross. Yeah, which I'm really looking forward to.
Oh.
That is... Oh, yeah, and I'm at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival if you want to come see me, as is Tarot, doing a work in progress, so it'll be like £7, dead cheap. So thanks for listening, and there's still another part to come.
Oh, God, no, fucking
No,
more.
it's fine. We get to his death, and we get to the aftermath of his death.
What about these people that are saving these up?
Well, they're mad. We can't do anything to help them, Rachel.
Yeah, fuck them.
You fucking weird little bingers. That guy's gone quiet, you know, the one that we like bullied for ages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's like, how many parts will this be? How many parts will this be? Bless him.
It's gone on for a while now.
Yeah, sorry. Right. Thanks for listening, guys. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.